Morning now dawned and Shahrazaad broke off from what she had been allowed to say. Then, when it was the 19th night, she continued. I have heard, O auspicious king, that the caliph ordered their story to be written down in the records and placed in the royal archives. He then asked the first girl, have you any news of the jinn lady who bewitched your sisters? Commander of the faithful, she replied, she gave me a lock of her hair and told me that when I wanted her I should burn a single hair and she would come quickly, even if she were on the far side of Mount Qaf. The caliph asked her to produce the lock of hair, which she did, and he then took a single strand and burned it. When the smell of the burning spread, the palace was rocked by a tremor, there was a sound like a peal of thunder, and there stood the lady. As she was a Muslim, she greeted the caliph, who replied, peace be on you and the mercy and blessings of God. Know, she went on, that this girl sowed the seed of gratitude for a good deed that she did me, for which I could not repay her, when she saved me from death and killed my enemy. I then saw what her sisters had done to her. At first I wanted to kill them, but I was afraid that this might distress her, so then I thought that I should take revenge by turning them by magic into dogs. If you now want them to be set free, Commander of the Faithful, I shall release them as a favor to you and to her, for I am a Muslim. Do so, he said, and after that I shall begin to investigate the affair of the girl who was beaten. If it turns out that she was telling the truth, we shall avenge her on whoever wronged her. Commander of the Faithful, said the lady, I shall release the two and then tell you who it was who wronged this girl and seized her wealth, someone who is your closest relation. She then took a bowl of water, cast a spell over it and recited some unintelligible words. She sprinkled water on the faces of the two bitches and said, return to your former shapes as humans, which they did. Commander of the Faithful, she then said, the young man who beat the girl is your own son, Al-Amin, the brother of Al-Mamun. He had heard of her great beauty and set a trap for her. But he married her legally and was within his rights to beat her, as he had imposed a condition on her and got her to swear a solemn oath that she would do nothing to break it. Break it she did, however, and he was going to kill her, but for fear of God he beat her instead and sent her back to her own house. This is the story of the second girl, but God knows better. When the caliph heard what she had to say and learned how the girl had come to be beaten, he was filled with astonishment and said, Glory be to God, the Exalted, the Omnipotent, who has granted me the favor of learning this girl's history and rescued these two others from sorcery and torture. By God, I shall do something that will be recorded after me. Then he had his son Al-Amin brought before him and he questioned him about the second girl, questions to which Al-Amin returned a truthful answer. He then brought in cadis and notaries, as well as the three dervishes, together with the first girl and her two sisters who had been bewitched. He married the three of them to the three dervishes, who had told him that they were kings, and whom he now appointed as chamberlains at his court, giving them all they needed and assigning them allowances, as well as lodgings in the palace of Baghdad. He returned the girl who had been beaten to his son Al-Amin, renewing their marriage contract, giving her a great store of wealth and ordering that their house should be rebuilt with the greatest splendor. He himself married the housekeeper and slept with her that night, and in the morning he gave her a chamber of her own among his concubines, together with slave girls to serve her and regular allowances. The people were astonished at his magnanimity, generosity and wisdom. His orders were that all these stories should be written down. Dunyazad said to her sister, Shahrazaad, by God, no one has heard so fine and pleasant a story, but tell me another to pass what remains of this wakeful night." "Willingly," Shahrazad replied, "if the king gives me leave." "Tell your story at once," he said, and she began. It is said, King of the age and Lord of our times, that one night the Caliph Harun al-Rashid summoned his vizier Jafar and said, "I want to go down into the city to ask the common people about the governors who have charge of them, so as to depose any of whom they complain and promote those to whom they are grateful." "To hear is to obey," replied Jafar. So the Caliph, Jafar and Masra left the palace and made their way through the city, walking in the markets and streets until they passed a lane. There they saw a very old man carrying on his head a fishing net and a basket, and holding a stick in his hand. He was walking slowly and reciting. They said to me, "Among mankind, you with your wisdom are a moonlit night." I said, "Do not say this to me. There is no wisdom without power. Were they to try to pawn me and my wisdom, together with my books and my inkstand, for one day's worth of food, it would not work. And such a bargain would be thought contemptible. The poor, their state, their life. How dark they are with troubles. In summer they cannot find food, and in the cold they have to warm themselves over a brazier. Street dogs attack them and they are the butt of every despicable man. When one of them complains about his lot, there is none to excuse him among all mankind. Such is the life of the poor man. It will be best for him when he is in his grave." When the Caliph heard what the man was reciting, he said to Jafar, "Look at this man and note his verses, which show that he is in need." The Caliph then went up to the man and said, "Sheikh, what is your craft?" "I am a fisherman," he replied. "I left home at midday, but up till now God has not provided me with anything with which I can feed my family. I am tired of life and I wish that I were dead. Would you go back with us to the Tigris, stand on the bank and trust in my luck as you cast your net? Whatever comes up I will buy for 100 dinars. When he heard this, the old man agreed with delight. He went with the three of them back to the river, cast his net and waited before pulling in the cord and dragging it in. Up it came with a heavy, locked chest. The Caliph looked at the chest, handled it and noted its weight, after which he gave the fisherman his 100 dinars, and the man went off. The Caliph himself then left, accompanied by Masra, who was carrying the chest, and they brought it up to the palace. Candles were lit, and after the chest had been placed in front of the Caliph, Jafar and Masra came forward and broke it open. In it they found a basket of palm leaves sewn up with threads of red wool, and after they had cut this open, they found a carpet. When they had lifted this out, they discovered a shawl, and wrapped in this was a girl like a silver ingot, who had been killed and cut in pieces, a sight that so distressed the Caliph that his tears flowed over his cheeks. He turned to Jafar and said, "Dog of a vizier, are people to be murdered and thrown into the river during my reign, so that I am to be held responsible for them on the day of judgment? By God, I must make the murderer pay for this girl's death, and I shall put him to the most cruel of deaths." He then told Jafar in his furious rage, "It is as true as is my descent from the Abbasid caliphs that if you do not produce the murderer for my justice, I will hang you at the palace gate together with 40 of your cousins." Before leaving his presence, Jafar asked for a 3-day delay, which the Caliph granted. He then went down sadly into the city, saying to himself, "How can I find out who killed this girl and bring him to the Caliph? If I bring the wrong person, I shall be held responsible for him. I don't know what to do." For 3 days, he sat at home, and on the 4th the Caliph sent a chamberlain to fetch him. When he came to the caliph and was asked where the murderer was, he said, "Commander of the faithful, am I the monitor of murder victims that I should know who killed the girl?" The caliph was enraged and gave orders that he should be hanged below the palace. A town crier was ordered to call out in the streets of Baghdad, "Whoever wants to see the hanging of Jafar the Barmecide, the caliph's vizier, and the hanging of his Barmecide cousins at the palace gate, let him come to watch." People came out from all quarters of the city to see the execution, although they did not know why the Barmecides were being hanged. The gallows was set up and the victims were made to stand beneath. The executioners were waiting for the agreed signal from the caliph, and the crowd was weeping for Jafar and his cousins. At this point, however, out came a young man, handsome, well-dressed, with a face bright as the moon, dark eyes, radiant forehead, red cheeks and a mole like a disk of ambergris. He cleared a way for himself through the people and kept on until he stood before Jafar. "Lord of the emirs and shelterer of the poor," he said, "you are saved from this plight. The killer of the murdered girl whom you found in the chest is I, so hang me in retaliation for her death and take revenge for her on me." When Jafar heard this, he was glad that he himself had escaped death, but he felt sorry for the young man. While they were talking, an old man, stricken in years, made his way through the crowd until he reached the two of them. He greeted them and said, "My lord, great vizier, don't believe what this young man says. No one but I killed the girl, so avenge her death on me. If you do not, I will demand justice from you in the presence of Almighty God." "Vizier," said the youth, "this is the maundering of an old man who doesn't know what he is saying. It was one and one alone who killed her, so make me pay for her death." "My son," said the old man, "you are young and this world is still attractive to you, while I am old and have had my fill of it. I shall give my life to ransom you, and I shall ransom the vizier and his cousins, for I killed the girl, and I conjure you by God to hang me quickly, as there is no life for me now that she is dead." The vizier was astonished to see what was happening, and he took the young man and the old one to the caliph. He kissed the ground and said, "Commander of the faithful, I have brought you the murderer of the girl." "Which is he?" asked the caliph. "This young man says that he killed her, while the old man here says that that is a lie and that he himself is the killer. Here are the two of them before you." The caliph looked at them and asked, "Which of you did kill her?" "I did," said the young man. "I am the killer," protested the old man. "Take the two of them," said the caliph to Jafar, "and hang them both." "If only one of them killed her," said Jafar, "then to hang the other would be unjust." The young man insisted, "By the truth of the one God who raised up the heavens and spread out the earth, it was I who killed her, and this was how she was killed." He described what the caliph had found, which made him sure that the young man was indeed the murderer. Filled with wonder at what the two had said, the caliph asked the young man, "Why was it that you unjustly killed this girl, and what led you to confess to the murder without being beaten? Why did you come yourself just now to tell me to avenge her on you?" The young man replied, "You must know, Commander of the faithful, that this girl was my cousin and my wife, while this old man is her father and my uncle. I married her when she was a virgin, and God gave me 3 sons by her. She used to love me and wait on me, and I saw no fault in her, while I for my part loved her dearly. At the beginning of this month, she fell seriously ill, but I brought her doctors and gradually she got better. I wanted to take her to the baths, but she said that before going, there was something that she wanted for which she had been longing. I said that I would willingly get it and asked what it was. I have a longing for an apple, she said, that I can smell and from which I can take a bite. I went straight away to the city and searched for apples, but I couldn't find a single one to buy, even for a dinar. I went back home in distress and told my wife of my failure. This upset her. She had been weak before, and that night she became much weaker. I spent the night brooding over the problem, and when morning came, I left my house and did the rounds of the orchards, one after the other, without finding any apples in them. Then I met an old gardener and, when I asked him, he told me, there are few or no apples to be found, except in Basra, in the orchard of the Commander of the Faithful, where they are in the charge of his gardener who keeps them for his master. I went back home, and my love and affection for my wife led me to make myself ready to set out on a journey to Basra. I traveled for 15 days and nights there and back, bringing my wife 3 apples which I had bought from the gardener at Basra for 1 dinar each. I went in and gave them to her, but they gave her no pleasure and she put them aside. Her weakness and fever had grown worse, and this went on for 10 days, after which she recovered. I then left my house and went to my shop, where I sat buying and selling. At midday, while I was sitting there, a black slave passed by holding one of those 3 apples in his hand and playing with it. When I asked him about the apple, pretending that I wanted to get one like it, he laughed and told me that he had got it from his mistress. I had been away, he explained, and when I got back, I found her sick. She had 3 apples with her, and she told me that her cuckold of a husband had gone to Basra for them and had bought them for 3 dinars. It was one of these that I took. When I heard what the slave had to say, Commander of the Faithful, the world turned black for me. I got up, closed my shop and returned home, out of my mind with anger. Looking at the apples, I could see only 2. Where is the 3rd? I asked my wife, and when she said, I don't know, I was certain that the slave had told me the truth, so I picked up a knife, and coming from behind her, without a word I knelt on her breast and slit her throat with the knife. Then I cut off her head and quickly put her in a basket, covering her with a shawl. I wrapped her in a piece of carpet, sewed the whole thing up and put it in a chest, which I locked. I then loaded it onto my mule and threw it with my own hands into the Tigris. In God's name, Commander of the Faithful, I implore you to hang me quickly, as I am afraid that my wife will demand restitution from me on the day of judgment. For when I had thrown her into the river without anyone knowing what I had done, I went back home, and there I found my eldest son in tears, although he did not know what I had done to his mother. When I asked him why he was crying, he told me that he had taken one of his mother's apples and had gone into the lane to play with his brothers. He said, but a tall black slave snatched it from me and asked me where I had got it. I told him that my father had gone to Basra to bring it for my mother who was sick, and that he had bought 3 apples for 3 dinars. The slave took the apple and paid no attention to me, even though I told him this a second and a third time, and then he hit me and went off with it. I was afraid that my mother would beat me because of it, and so my brothers and I went off out of the city. Evening came and I was still afraid of what she might do to me. For God's sake, Father, don't say anything to her that may make her ill again. When I heard what the boy had to say, I realized that this slave was the one who had made up a lying story to hurt my wife, and I was certain that I had killed her unjustly. While I was weeping bitterly, this old man, her father, arrived and, when I told him what had happened, he sat down beside me and wept. We went on weeping until midnight, and for 5 days until now we have been mourning her and regretting her unjust death. All the blame for this rests on the slave, and it is he who is responsible for her death. I implore you, by your ancestors' honor, to kill me quickly, as there is no life for me now she is dead. So avenge her death on me. When the caliph heard the young man's story, he was filled with astonishment and said, "By God, I shall hang no one except this damned slave, and I shall do a deed which will cure the sick and please the glorious king."